Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the final match of Saturday's games for the Victory Road World Cup of Pokémon VGC, brought to you by Elgato, GG Tour, and Metafi. My name is Maeve. I've been with you almost all of today, but I am psyched to be wrapping up the day with Hayden, and we have a really exciting match between teams that we have not been able to feature yet on stream this weekend.
Yeah, two incredible teams, Australia and South Korea, both have had phenomenal performances up till now. They have some spectacular players, and I'm really excited to show we get to show Ben Madigan, who's gone 7-0 up till now. All 7 weeks, I think, is the only player to have done so. And so it's very exciting to get to see him up against Hyungwoo, no stranger to these draft league formats, having done really well in NPA before. And both of these teams, really teams to watch, either of them, definitely capable of taking the tournament.
Yeah, and you're kind of looking at, between these two teams, you're looking at a team that did the best from last year from this current group of top 8, because the South Korean team actually finished top 4. The other top 4 teams, the other 3 top 4 teams, did not make it this far into the competition this year. So South Korea is currently the only one that is trying to repeat at least that top 4 run. Australia is a team that had a really tough group stage last year. They were paired with the United States and New Zealand in their group. However, and they did not make it out. However, they did make it out this year, and they are continuing to play on currently as well. If we want to take a look at the scores between these two teams, we'll see exactly how even it is. It is currently 1-1 between these two teams. We have one match today, and we'll be able to bring you 2 more matches tomorrow. So there is a chance that we could wrap this up this weekend on stream. However, at this point too, knowing how tough both of these teams are and how stacked both of these teams are, I think it's going to be incredibly difficult to see if we could determine a winner on stream this weekend.
Just looking at the players who have not played yet, there's so many huge names from Australia's side and so many spectacular players from South Korea. Madigan, Ben, and Christopher Kahn, and Sim Vandellis, and then Mitch, like so many players that I'm sure Australia is counting on to try to get those wins to get them ahead versus South Korea. But we get to feature one of these now where we have a chance for Hyungwoo to be able to stop the undefeated player, and that would be such a huge statement from South Korea. They're definitely an accomplished enough team to take this, and that momentum would be so strong going into the Sunday matches we'll be streaming.
Yeah, absolutely right. And Seung-hoon Cha's team is one that I actually really love. That Sableye Reshiram is something that I got to mess around with a little bit for the London Open, but I did not do terribly well. So it's still interesting to see, players pilot in a way that they're far more talented. That team building can be really solid. And it's not exactly a restricted pair that we see all too often. However, if we want to take a look at both of these players that we will currently be featuring and talk a little bit about their successes as players, like you said, we already know as well, there is some NPA and grassroots and draft league wins in there. However, official results: Ben Madigan, 2021 Players Cup 4, top 16, Players Cup 1, top 12, Oceania Internationals, top 64, Brisbane Regionals, top 16, Hyungwoo Shin as well, 2020 Korean League Autumn top 16, Worlds Day 2 competitor, Korean League Finals champion, Korean League Winter top 16. So a lot of really great results for both of these players. And like you said, there really cannot be enough said about Ben Madigan currently being undefeated in this league right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben has had an impressive performance so far. Definitely knows what he's doing in this World Cup situation. But Hyungwoo, all of those Korean League results are so impressive. That's such an incredibly competitive field. There are so many brilliant players there. And I think it's easy for those of us who maybe follow the Western sphere a little bit more in Pokemon to miss how impressive those things are. But definitely, I would be terrified to face someone like Hyungwoo. And definitely, if anyone's going to stop that streak, Hyungwoo is definitely someone who could.
And both of these players are running what looks to be incredibly hyper offensive teams. Hyungwoo running something that we may call size spam, right? With that Calyrex, Shadow Rider plus Indeedee, Whimsicott, Regieleki, Landorus, and Kyogre. Ben running Zacian, Kyogre, Incineroar, Rillaboom, Whimsicott, and Thundurus. And you and I spoke in the break. You and I consistently find ways to cast matches with Whimsicott and with Tailwind users together. However, I think it'll be something that could be really interesting because speed control is something that I think is going to be one of the top priorities for both of these trainers in this match.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit of a theme here, these Whimsicotts. But also, they're such strong Pokemon for players to use in really high-stakes matches where maybe you can recognize the composition of the 6 Pokemon, but maybe you aren't sure what moves that Whimsicott has, and even going through Game 1, through Game 2, there might still be that one slot that the Whimsicott has, and if it could be anything from Fake Tears to Light Screen to Tickle the Worry Seed. We've cast it all, and so any of those options could really be influential, and so it's got to be a little bit scary to see that you don't get all the information you need just from Team Preview. You have to really play those first games and hope that you get the information you need to win those games. So both of those Pokemon could be influential. Also, the huge interaction between the two trains. Rillaboom is sort of the main way to stop this psychic spam from Indeedee and Calyrex Shadow being able to just sort of spout out those expanding forces. Calyrex can always still Astral Barrage, but definitely one of the things Ben has to kind of keep in mind is maybe you need to bring that Rillaboom as an answer. Maybe if you do, though, you have to worry about the psychic train coming in and preventing your answer to Kyogre.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a bit more of a terrain war versus the weather wars that we've kind of been seeing throughout the day. However, we will be seeing first the Indeedee and the Kyogre, and then we'll be seeing Zacian and Kyogre on the opposite side for Ben. So, pretty offensive leads here. I think Indeedee getting some Psychic Terrain up is going to be really helpful as well. Possibly kind of just to get Hyungwoo into a better position. Their Drizzle as well going off first, meaning that Ben is possibly running a little bit slower, and then Indeedee's Psychic Surge going off last. So kind of a nice way to get speed tiers between all 4 Pokemon whose abilities interact right at the start.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, as you mentioned, getting that Indeedee into position right off the bat is really powerful, given that the Zacian would love to fire off something like a Play Rough into that Kyogre, and now has to just worry about that being redirected into a not quite so important Pokemon like Indeedee, and then potentially losing a bunch of your health to that Water Spout. So we can definitely see Ben hovering over that Protect button, wanting to figure out how to play Zacian in a situation where it could be doing so much damage, but it can't pick what to target very well, and so maybe relying on Kyogre for the damage output here. On the other hand, Hyungwoo has the option to just keep clicking that Water Spout button and has that redirection, and that's a really strong opening to be able to show off in this Game 1, see how it works.
Yeah, Zacian's Protect is saying, I do not want to deal with Follow Me right now. However, Indeedee also going for a Protect this turn, so maybe an interesting call to allow it to go for a Follow Me later. Thunder from the Kyogre on Hyungwoo's side, already targeting right into the Kyogre on Ben's, does well over 50%, also getting a full paralysis there as well, showing a Life Orb as the item. Kyogre's Water Spout is going to do way less damage into the Kyogre on the opposite side, thanks to that big damage from the Thunder early on. And now you are at a huge disadvantage because this Indeedee has definitely called your Protect.
Such an interesting play to go for something that on paper looks like this incredibly hard read. You get that Thunder off into the Kyogre, you protect your Indeedee from any damage. You don't redirect things, even though that Zacian could have attacked the Kyogre. But then there were also lots of ways where seeing that Kyogre was faster, that Thunder was pretty safe. And so really nice for Hyungwoo to be able to get that off and establish so many different modes for this lead.
Follow Me, though, will be coming out this turn. The Whimsicott has switched in for the Zacian to maybe provide a little bit more support in the next following turns. Water Spout, though, once again, into both of these Pokemon, thanks to that bit of damage as well that it has dealt. Not able to do enough to get either of these Pokemon down into the red, but a full paralysis from that Thunder and that paralysis that Kyogre has means it is not going to be able to do anything this turn. And this Whimsicott may be trying to help out a partner who can't do a whole lot just yet.
Such a tough situation for Ben to be in. You really don't want to start Game 1 with such bad luck, especially when you miss the prediction 2 and you have that Thunder go off. The damage is bad enough, but not being able to get that Thunder in return, if that's what the Kyogre was going for, is such a huge deal. And now being stuck with this Whimsicott sort of setups that it can Tailwind, but then the Kyogre's still going to be slower. It's a really awkward spot for Ben.
Yeah, and I mean, at that point, right, maybe you're just hoping to take that knockout on your own Kyogre, bring in something else that can take advantage of that Tailwind, but no Follow Me once again. Another Thunder has knocked out this Kyogre on Ben's side. Does at least mean as well maybe that you're going to be dealing a little bit more damage with an Expanding Force into this Whimsicott, maybe try and knock it out after it's only been able to get a Tailwind up once. It is enough damage to take this Whimsicott off the field. It's going to leave Ben with his final 2 Pokemon, and if it is something like that Rillaboom and you send it in, you only have this one opportunity to go for something like a Grassy Glide before that Indeedee on the opposite side of the field maybe switches in and out for something that wants to deal with the Rillaboom maybe a little bit better than his own Kyogre.
Yeah, such a tough spot to be forced to bring out that Rillaboom when the Indeedee can be positioned so properly. Then again, if there's anything that Kyogre's Zacian team knows how to do, it is go down to 2 Pokemon and then be able to just have a lot of momentum in that situation. I'm sure Ben would have preferred to get enough damage off to really be threatening this Kyogre, and worrying about that redirection too is really tough. So definitely an uphill battle, but getting that Tailwind off is what Ben needed for a reason, and maybe there's some trick up his sleeve, some predictions he can make, a little bit of luck that will be able to turn things around.
Yeah.
On the other hand, this Indeedee is doing so much work, and it's going to be so hard for Ben to adjust to going forwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And neither of these trainers have used their Dynamax as of yet. Rillaboom going to be the only Dynamax option for Ben. It is going to be nice maybe to have that extra HP just to be able to do some big damage. Go for something to target into this Indeedee maybe if you need to, just to get it off of the field before then you deal with something like that Kyogre. Kyogre still, we saw it has Thunder. If it's carrying Ice Beam as well, then it's going to be, able to hit it for super effective damage, and then maybe change up the weather if needed, because you currently then can bring your Kyogre back in, reset the rain also at another point. If whatever Hyungwoo has in the back as well is probably going to be his main Dynamax answer. His Kyogre is still at a pretty decent amount of HP, especially if you go into Dynamax. However, you probably don't mind losing your Kyogre here if it can get off a nice move here, especially going for another Follow Me. That Indeedee still has not been hit once, even though it has gone for Follow Me every single time. Rillaboom going for that Dynamax this turn, definitely the time to do so. Try and get some big shots off, try and level the playing field a little bit and swing that momentum back in your direction, since you were able to get your 2 Pokemon in without having them take any damage thanks to, maybe not thanks to, but by losing your Pokemon in the prior turns. At least at this point as well, you do have the Tailwind on your side, so your Zacian could go first, but Indeedee going for Protect this turn, not going for something like that Follow Me. Behemoth Blade from the Zacian targets into that Indeedee as well, so if this Rillaboom also did that double target, then you're going to be in a really nice spot to once again go for another Follow Me this turn. However, you went for that G-Max Drum Solo into the Kyogre, and you're able to get that knockout, meaning that while that Indeedee is still safe for now, it may not want to be on the field for the next few turns.
Wonderful knockout on that Kyogre, but also Hyungwoo making a great call by protecting that Indeedee, making sure it's still around to do Follow Me the next turn. I love how often Hyungwoo is not clicking that Follow Me button. It's very easy to do with Indeedee, just click Follow Me constantly, make sure you do as much with those other Pokemon, but Kyogre really wasn't in a position to take this game, especially if that Behemoth Blade had a chance to KO the Indeedee, but even if not, it wasn't necessarily going for a ton of damage into both of these Pokemon, and so instead trying to position a different Pokemon, like maybe this Regieleki, while you have that Follow Me support, is a really interesting adaptation.
Yeah, I think Regieleki is a really funky kind of pick here, right? Because you can still go for something like that Follow Me. You can maybe go for an Electra, maybe not use this Regieleki as your Dynamax option, but just use it to try and get some speed down on Ben's side. So you could send in something like your Calyrex maybe, or, if that is in the back later on, just to try and get some Astral Barrages in, maybe just try and chip some health so that you can get an easier knockout. That's kind of what some Pokemon, when you run these teams with Calyrex Shadow Rider, your main goal is to chip down Pokemon, maybe get yourself in a good position to send in your Calyrex, allow it to move first, and just get some quick, clean knockouts before taking any damage itself. However, Ben is running out of time here. It really looks like he just snatched in those moves, and will at least be able to go this turn. However, Hyungwoo decides to go for that Dynamax this turn, that Regieleki, most likely instead of something like the Indeedee.
So we saw Rillaboom getting in the right call there, going for the Max Quake into the Regieleki. We'll have to see if the Follow Me just redirects that, but getting that special defense boost would be so big. I don't know if it went in on time, though. I'm not sure what this Rillaboom's going to go for.
Think he got it just in time, right? But I could be incorrect. Follow Me, though, from the Indeedee will direct these moves, especially that Dynamax move from the Rillaboom onto the other side. Zacian going for Behemoth Blade this turn into that Indeedee will still do a huge, massive chunk of damage at this point, but if it's enough for the whole knockout, it is not. That Indeedee is still able to hang on with just a small sliver of HP. Max Airstream from that Regieleki into the Rillaboom still does a pretty decent chunk of damage, about 25%, maybe 30% of that damage through that Dynamax as well, and then also going to boost the speed of that Regieleki, who really does not need an extra speed boost on top of everything, but G-Max Drum Solo into this Indeedee will be enough to finish it off. However, that is not exactly what you may have wanted to do, so I think you were right. I don't think he got that move in time if he went for that Max Quake.
That's so tough. Really telling that Ben is a little bit on the back foot here, needing to think really, really hard about these particular turns to try to somehow be able to win from down to 4 at the start. Definitely not the worst of ways that could have gone. The moves at the top were pretty strong, and so you do still take out that Indeedee, and maybe your Zacian still outspeeds it, could KO the Regieleki or do a lot of damage. But definitely really tough when what you wanted to see was that special defense boost on that turn, and not having that makes things a lot more challenging for Ben to go forwards. Not the end of the game. This was also a very tough game for Ben to win. Easy to sort of go forwards, but tough to see that reminder of the time is so short that these players have to make such incredibly complicated decisions, and it's definitely showing on Ben's side that it's tough to click everything on time.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, right, you still have your Rillaboom. You could go for another Max Quake now because that Max Airstream did not apply to the Calyrex, so you may still kind of be able to get that damage off if need be. You you have the terrain on your side. The terrain never changed, which is good, but you don't have too much time left with that terrain to maybe get a grassy glide once you're out of that Dynamax. It doesn't have too many turns left. Max Airstream once again though will help to boost this Calyrex up. Target down into the Rillaboom is probably going to need at least 2 more of those maybe to get that knockout. I think it would be close with just 1 more on top of that. But that speed boost, I think, is more critical than the damage you'd be doing with something like a Max Lightning. Behemoth Blade from the Zacian, though, free to target into whichever Pokemon it wants, and it's still able to move faster than this Calyrex. So targeting into the Calyrex, it is not enough to get a full one-hit knockout here, but it does do a really nice amount of damage. Astral Barrage, enough to knock this Rillaboom out and brings the Zacian down pretty low. So I think at this point, right, I think, like you said, the game is pretty wrapped up. You can just go for another Astral Barrage. You can go for something even like a Volt Switch as well in this... or even like a Thunderbolt as well into that Zacian, and you've pretty much wrapped up the game in your own favor.
Such a tough position because that's exactly where that special defense boost would have been useful. If you had that on the Rillaboom, maybe it would have survived the Airstream plus Astral Barrage. Maybe your Zacian would have been in a better situation. But as it is, Ben, unfortunately, just not in a position to win this first game. But at the same time, it's sort of a mixed bag. When you lose that first game due to the Thunder into paralysis, into full paralysis, maybe you can sort of look at that going forward and say, all right, if I'm not quite so unlucky, I don't have to adjust too much. I can still win this next game. Sure, I'm down a game, but that's not the end of the world. It's one of the many advantages to playing best of 3 and not the single elimination that Pokemon used to be way back in the day.
You know, this is kind of like when every time I see something like this happen, I just think about how everything's going to be different in just a couple of weeks, really, when we get that new item in Sword and Shield. I cannot remember the name of it off the top of my head. It was something like, it was some sort of cloak or something like, yeah, Covert Cloak that stops those secondary effects like that paralysis from something like Thunder. And it's like, if only you had that now and kind of seeing exactly what that could do, because that's one of those things like, you know, it doesn't always feel like it has the best option, but if you're a Pokemon that's consistently getting hit by something like Thunder, you know, like a Kyogre could be, either a Thunder or a Thunderbolt or anything that's going to really cause paralysis, it's something that I think will be interesting for the future of VGC, kind of as we begin to look forward into the next few months. However, looking forward into the next match, like you said, there is some bad luck, but I do think as well that maybe getting that Whimsicott in for the lead and getting that Tailwind up first might put you in a better position instead of taking something like that Thunder game 1, because I think we saw too as well that Ben's Kyogre was slower typically.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if you don't get that paralysis, that Thunder is not something you want to have happen. It was really telling of the lead matchup just not being quite so strong from Ben's side. And it's going to be a really big challenge, knowing that this Indeedee can take things like Behemoth Blade, knowing that the Calyrex can too, trying to figure out the right way to handle those pesky Psychic-type Pokemon that can be so offensively threatening or have Follow Me to redirect when the Zacian alone isn't really going to do it. So interested to see what Ben comes up with here.
Yeah, I almost wonder, right, if you can get another Behemoth Blade off onto something like that in Indeedee, then it would be in Quick Attack range, and we saw that the Zacian does have Quick Attack. However, it is going to be Kyogre, Whimsicott, Kyogre, Regieleki. Regieleki, not exactly the Pokemon you want to see when you are facing it down. Even though you have the opportunity for Tailwind, some Regieleki can just move so fast that it almost doesn't even matter, especially if they go for something like an Electro Web just to try and slow you down. And at this point too, you're at a threat of taking something like 2 different electric type attacks into your Kyogre, who may not be feeling all that safe.
Yeah, absolutely. So great call of the Whimsicott starting out from Ben's side, not wanting to have to switch in, just wanting to be there right away. But really tough with the adjustment Hyungwoo made, just sort of one step ahead, getting that Regieleki out against that Kyogre is really strong. Ben still has plenty of options. We can see him hovering over that Dynamax option, which maybe lets him KO that Regieleki even if it maxes. But a tough spot all around to have so many super effective moves into this Kyogre. Sure, it has that special defense stat, but it's still maybe not thrilled about this situation.
Yeah, and I think as well, looking at the move choice that this Kyogre has, we can probably assume maybe that it's that Assault Vest, because it's running 4 full attacking moves. So maybe at this point you might just try and be relying on that Assault Vest to try and get that damage off. You don't have to worry about something like a Follow Me this turn, but this Dynamax Regieleki is something that you really you cannot ignore it, because you know any big damage from it is going to be absolutely detrimental to your team and maybe to your game plan moving forward. Hyungwoo starting out big though, right? And Ben having to match that with his own Dynamax. And a Dynamax Kyogre at this point may be the one way that you can deal with something like this Max Lightning and with something maybe like a Thunder from the Kyogre on the opposite side, as long as maybe you can get it to move first and then maybe you can do some big damage with a Max Geyser of your own, then that might be pretty useful, especially thanks to a Tailwind, but they can still match with a Max Airstream because we saw that in Game 1. Tailwind this turn will at least boost your speeds first, so you'll be moving at least maybe before this Regieleki, but Regieleki is still faster. They can be absolutely so impressive. A Max Airstream into the Whimsicott, not enough to bring it down to a possible Focus Sash, does bring it down into the red though, and will boost the speed on that side of the field just to try and match the Tailwind that Ben has set up. Ben's Kyogre though, going for that Max Geyser first before the Kyogre on Hyungwoo's side into the Regieleki as well. Still does a ton of damage, but it does not bring it down into that bottom 25%. Thunder from the Kyogre into Ben's Kyogre is still a nice way to do a ton of damage as well.
Yeah, such an interesting way of playing Regieleki in this situation. I think for sure the Kyogre being slower than the Regieleki even in Tailwind, pretty strong confirmation that it might be that Assault Vest item, but then Regieleki did not take nearly as much as I was expecting from that Max Geyser, and it's also been making some really interesting choices of going for Airstream instead of starting with those electric attacks, and I think that's really paying off here. This Regieleki is faster than everything else on the field, I believe, at this point, and it can go for that Airstream again to make the Kyogre on Hyungwoo's side faster. So this Kyogre has Dynamax, so it's not under immediate threat, but it's definitely struggling to do damage, and this advantage from the Tailwind is sort of slowly disappearing with how this Regieleki is playing.
Yeah, and I mean, you can go for multiple Max Airstreams. You cannot go for multiple Tailwinds. They don't stack in the same way that an Airstream would. And by sending out this Indeedee, you may be putting a stop to something from this Whimsicott thanks to, that Prankster ability. However, but I think at this point too, Whimsicott probably was able to deal with that, and you get the Psychic Seed boost. So you've at least put this Regieleki in a good position to maybe put on more pressure in its final turn of Dynamax, as this Max Lightning into Kyogre is definitely going to be enough to get that knockout. And sending this Kyogre back, it was only able to take one good Dynamax turn with that Max Geyser, and then at that point too, you've already kind of, if you're Ben, you've changed up the terrain thanks to that Max Lightning, so now at least at this point you're not going to be dealing with something like an Expanding Force double target from the Indeedee. However, Whimsicott going for this Moonblast into the Indeedee that was that Kyogre, just trying to do some damage. Doesn't do a whole lot there, but that is enough chip for the Zacian to knock it out with a Behemoth Blade.
Yeah, so nice to get that chip. Nice to still have Tailwind up, but a really well-played and well-timed electric attack from that Regieleki. Presumably a physical attack to be able to get that KO. Really well-timed, given that you sort of wait for the Kyogre to commit a Dynamax for you to sort of realize for sure it's that Assault Vest item, and then be able to know, okay, there's no way this thing is switching out right now. I'll bring in Indeedee, so even if that Whimsicott went for a Tickle or a Charm, this Regieleki wouldn't have been affected. And then getting that clean KO, this Kyogre didn't really get to use Dynamax at all. And Ben's once again battling from behind. Although, with Tailwind games, it's so interesting, losing Pokemon isn't always a problem. And as you mentioned, that Indeedee being in range of Behemoth Blade is such a big deal going forwards.
Yeah, and that might just be the one big thing, right? Because now with the terrain change, you could go for something like a Tickle, which we can see that this Whimsicott has. So that may be a way to try and mitigate some damage from this Regieleki and just try and get through this Dynamax. You can go for a Behemoth Blade and target into that Indeedee, get it off of the field before it can do a whole lot. You may still have to kind of prep for another Pokemon to switch in and allow that Indeedee to maybe preserve some of that terrain, knowing that maybe this Regieleki is not too much longer for this world, especially if it can get tickled if need be. Thanks to the terrain now changing, but it is still boosted by that electric terrain, so it's still probably going to want to be here and still fire off some big strong attacks, and it's still going to be the fastest thing on the field thanks to those Airstream boosts. And even with the Whimsicott getting that Tailwind off for Ben on that side, Zacian's not going to be faster, because there are still two Airstream boosts on Hyungwoo's side. And again, we are running low on this time, getting it down to just 2 seconds for Ben, because Ben at this point definitely, I think, struggling here. But Indeedee switching out, bringing in the Kyogre. Kyogre would be a much better way to take a Behemoth Blade than that Indeedee. However, Max Airstream, another Max Airstream coming out from this Regieleki into the Whimsicott, enough to just get that last little bit of HP and just get another speed boost, especially for that partner Pokemon Kyogre, who now, once there is no more threat of Tailwind, you put yourself in a great position to maybe just start firing off some more Water Pulses or Water Spouts or Origin Pulse. Behemoth Blade from Zacian as well, if this targeted into what was the Indeedee. This Kyogre is going to take that far more comfortably, but it targeted into the Regieleki, and that is going to get it off of the field. So now you've gotten rid of the big threat, and the Kyogre only has 1 speed boost.
Yeah, nice to get rid of that Regieleki before it continues to cause problems in this electric terrain. But also, Hyungwoo's timed this so well with getting that one Airstream boost. There's only one more turn of Tailwind, and the Indeedee still in the back, and so you can send out this Rillaboom, but it's not going to be in grassy terrain for very long, and the Indeedee can just redirect those attacks right into itself. And so this Kyogre is just in a phenomenal position. If you can make it through this last turn of Tailwind, it's going to be the fastest thing for a while. There's no priority for it to worry about, and it's going to be able to do so much damage. You even have that fourth Pokemon in the back to be able to close this out. Hyungwoo just managing his resources so well with that Dynamax Alecki, making Tailwind so much harder to make use of.
Yeah, and I think at this point, right, as well, I believe that his Kyogre had Protect. I'm fairly certain that we saw it in that last game. It is that Life Orb variant, I believe. So, yeah, it's that Life Orb variant because the Regieleki did not have that Life Orb. So it is, it does have the opportunity to go for something like a Protect, just stall out this last turn, maybe just allow for this Indeedee to maybe take a couple of hits if need be. It's really done its main job, right? Like, it can go for these expanding forces, it can do that damage, but its main job, I think, was to just change the terrain and make Rillaboom have a really tough time doing damage to this Kyogre that it really wants to do. Because even if you go for something like a high horsepower, you may just take an Ice Beam in retaliation. Zacian going to protect this turn, though, maybe try and stop something like a Water Spout from getting a full one-hit knockout here, but the Kyogre also matching a Protect with its own, just to make sure that it can deal for another turn, and then another Protect from the Indeedee. So like you said, we are just stalling out turns here.
Yeah, and with Tailwind gone, Ben's going to have a really tough time being able to make his way through this game. That Kyogre presumably faster than the Zacian and the Rillaboom. Indeed, it can just kind of click Follow Me, Kyogre can just click Water Spout, and it's going to be tough for Ben to be able to come back into this game. Even with all those cool attacks like Quick Attack, Psychic Train is going to prevent any of them from coming into play, and so if that Water Spout hits, maybe if it's Origin Pulse and missing a lot, you have some way into this, but it's definitely going to be challenging for Ben to find an angle out of this game. That Indeedee was it's just causing so much trouble for Ben on his side of the field, and there are so few options to get rid of it without taking a bunch of really strong attacks in return.
Something that's interesting to me, right? I think we saw the Zacian get its Protect up first, so I almost wonder if this might be a little bit different. Nope, that Kyogre is still going to move first here. So Indeedee getting that Follow Me plus a Water Spout, enough to knock the Zacian out thanks to the rain and thanks to it being almost entirely at full HP. Rillaboom will have to target into this Indeedee, and it's not going to be able to do damage as strong as something like the Zacian's Behemoth Blade was. I don't think this Grassy Flag will get the knockout. Yeah, definitely not. So at least at this point now, you don't have any more rain, but there really, I think, is no chance for Ben to kind of pull this one out, especially if it's something like that Calyrex Shadow Rider and back. This Rillaboom is already chipped down low enough that if it gets brought into the game, it can just go for a single Astral Barrage and get that last clean knockout that I think Hyungwoo needs. And at this point, this is going to bring the scores 1-2. So 1 for Australia, 2 for South Korea, and we still have 2 more matches tomorrow as well. So there is still a chance, right, that if South Korea wins both matches on stream tomorrow, that they have guaranteed their placement in top 4, tying what was their result last year.
Yeah, such a huge win for South Korea to be able to take down Ben, this incredible player for this format, and just so cleanly and well played by Hyungwoo to get that Indeedee in position, not going for Follow Me all the time, going for it when the timing was right and when you're really causing the most trouble for Ben. And then Australia still has so many great players, and this could absolutely go either way, but it must hurt a lot to lose, like, someone who was undefeated and you were really counting on to win this week when it also is really important. And then Ben doing so much for his team, but facing a really strong opponent. And Hyungwoo getting that win for South Korea, showing why it's such a formidable team and one that is absolutely capable of winning this all if they make it through this round.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of teams, right, that team that Hyungwoo was running, I said this to you in between break, my London Open team, that was an auto loss, Indeedee, Calyrex, Shadow Rider, so I know absolutely how threatening that hyper-offensive team can be, especially once you get it going. It was I never ran into it, but I lost a bunch anyway, so it didn't really matter if I had an auto loss or not. However, it's still, like you said, it is a great way of showing the strength of the South Korean team. Both of these teams, like you said, are so stacked. Again, you've got people who have come in second, top 8, a whole bunch of other results at Worlds from the Australian side who are still battling against these incredibly talented trainers from South Korea. And there is still plenty of Pokemon left, right? And we'll be privileged to see 2 more matches tomorrow, especially because I could see this one just being a set where it goes like 4-3. Like it's one game difference between the 2 teams. Like that's almost exactly how I would have picked it between the 2 of them.
Yeah, absolutely something that's going to come down to the wire. Make sure that you don't miss our announcements about what happens and what teams get to advance. Check out all of our socials, the Twitter, the YouTube, Discord, and everything. You can always catch the action at the World Cup website. many different places for you to check this out. Make sure that you, if you've missed any of these matches or if you can't make the stream tomorrow, make sure you check out YouTube and the Twitch VODs to be able to see some more of these matches. They're all so likely to come down to the wire. Even things like this 2-0 win we just saw were so incredibly nuanced with how the players managed to get to their situation where they finally secured that win rather than just having a good matchup.
Yeah, and speaking of tomorrow's matchups, if we want to take a look at the 5 matches that we will be featuring tomorrow, already very exciting here. Christopher Khan, Won-Suk Jung, a match you really do not want to miss. Both of those players are incredibly talented. Christopher Khan's younger brother just getting second at Worlds. Really one of the strongest families. I think there's a third brother in there as well that is also very good at Pokemon. Sam Pandela is a Jiseok Lee, so that is our first double header between South Korea and Australia. Ryan Lassetto of Canada versus Varun Gudapati of India, Brady Smith of the United States versus Aurélien Sula of France, Chayawat Traiwichcha versus Fiona Sinkowitz from both Thailand and Poland. So we'll be able to feature matches from all 4 of these quarterfinals matches. But I think at this point, right, we've been able to see so many tough matches that I'm so excited to continue to see more tough competition tomorrow as well. I think at this point, right, it's going to be something that's really, really funky. Also tomorrow as well, time of the stream starts at 2 p.m. UTC. So a little bit different from the time of today. However, it still should be there to watch it, especially for those earlier matches. It's great for us to stream those 2 double headers of Australia and South Korea a bit earlier so that those players have a chance to watch them as they're typically quite a bit ahead of us. So typically why we tend to start the stream a little bit earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure to check that out. If this stream is going really late for you, then the other one will end about 2 hours earlier. You just have to remember to get started 2 hours earlier as well. One final thank you we should give to all of our sponsors who are making sure that we can bring these to you at whatever time, 2 p.m. or 4 p.m. UTC. GG Tour, Elgato, and Metafi, thank you so much for sponsoring us once more. And I think that'll just about wrap it up for today, but make sure you don't forget about 2 p.m. tomorrow for a few more matches.